What's your name?
Bill Wilder,
And when were you born?
30th of December, 1926,
And where were you born?
San Saba, Texas.
Were you born in the hospital?
No,
Where?
I was born at home.
Who were your parents?
My parents were Ray and Kate Wilder.
Were they from San Saba?
Yes,
They grew up in San Saba.
my mother did. My father moved there from some other place in Texas.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a builder, contractor, carpenter.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I did.
How many?
I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters.
And where do you fall in that lineup?
I was the second born.
Who were your siblings?
My older brother was Ray Wilder Jr. My sister then was June. A brother named Jack, and then a sister named Sarah Kate, and another sister named Carol Sue, and finally a brother named Joe.
And are any still living?
No,
You're the last one living.
I'm the last one.
What did you do as a child for fun?
Well, I went fishing, flew kites,
And did you go swimming?
went swimming in the river,
In the river. What river is that? San
the
Saba?
San Saba River.
And did you do that with your siblings?
No, I did it with friends, and my mother was scared of water, and we did not have a public swimming pool at that time.
So the schools you went to, were they the public schools there in San Saba?
Yes,
Okay, so like San Saba Elementary?
yes, San Saba Elementary and San Saba High School were the only 2 schools there.
No junior high school.
No junior high school.
So you went from elementary straight to high school.
Yes, and at that time there were only 11 years of schooling in Texas.
All right, as a child, did you have a job?
I did. I started when I was 15 years old, I started working in the Palace Theater as a ticket taker and usher.
And so the Palace Theater was there in San Saba.
Yes.
And so you went there, got a job. You were doing tickets. Did you ever have any other jobs that you did there at the theater?
I then became a projectionist there, running the big 35 millimeter projectors, and eventually the assistant manager of that theater
So you lived there how long in San Saba?
until I was 18 years old.
And at 18, where'd you go at 18?
I was drafted into the Army. When I was in the Army, that was on my records. And the first job I had after basic training was running 16 millimeter projectors for various units in the Army.
Was it mainly for training or was it for entertainment or both?
It was for entertainment.
So you ran the movies. You played the movies for the troops.
Yes.
And was that your main job when you went into the Army?
For the first few months, maybe 6 months it was. I went to Vienna, Austria.
Was that for training or was that was after training?
That was after training. That was the first assignment I ever had. I was 19 when I got to Vienna. The war had been over for about 6 months when I got to Austria.
And what was your job when you got to Austria? What did you do?
That was the projectionist. I was transferred from Vienna to Salzburg, Austria, and I met my spouse in Salzburg.
What's her name?
Ernestine Grauwald. She was born and reared in Salzburg.
Which is right there, pretty close to the German border, right?
Yes, very close to the German border.
All right, so you were stationed first in Vienna, and then you went to Salzburg, and that's how you met
My wife.
your
yes.
wife. And how did you meet her? Where were you when you met her?
She was working for the Army as an interpreter. She spoke very good English and had a very good job at that point. And then I was assigned to work in a castle that was built sometime in the 1300s. And eventually, she was assigned to that same castle as a clerk at the door where people came and entered and left the hotel.
And you were still the projectionist at that time?
No, at that time I was the assistant manager of that castle. The castle was operated as an officer's getaway from Salzburg. It was only about 15 miles outside of Salzburg.
So how did you just start dating? Did you just ask her to go out?
Well, yes, eventually I did.
It took you a while to ask her?
It took a while. I was rather bashful.
Was there a language barrier?
Well, there was a language barrier. However, I decided I'm in their country, I should speak their language. They don't have to speak mine. So I started learning German right away. And I could carry on somewhat of a conversation when I met her. But she spoke perfect English. So we had no problem with the language barrier.
Was she glad that you learned?
I think so. She was an only child. And her mother loved me. I think I was a son her mother never had.
Oh.
She really did. She was my Austrian mother. And we did really well together. And I eventually met the entire family before we got married.
What about her father? Did you know her father?
Her father died when she was 2.5 years old.
Oh, so she was raised mainly by her mother.
She was raised by her mother and her grandfather.
And did you meet the grandfather?
Yes, I did. He was a great old man.
So you and Ernie, you start dating.
Yes.
And how long did you date? Approximately.
It ended up being almost 3 years.
3 years of dating.
Because it was a big job to get permission to marry in Austria in the Army. And it had to be approved by the commanding general of Austria for me to get married. I got one and I had it approved in 1948. Ernie's grandmother died of cancer. And her grandfather and other members of the family asked me if I would postpone the wedding because they wanted to give 1 year of mourning for her grandmother. And of course I did that. I came back to the States on leave during that time just to assure my family that I knew what I was doing. But I came back and then we got married in November of 1949.
So it sounds like then for about, several months you were away from Ernie, right?
For about 6 weeks.
6 weeks, okay. So did she come over with you to visit before you got married?
No.
So your family met her after you were married in
That's
Austria.
correct.
So you were married in Austria.
I was married in Austria.
And did you have a wedding?
I had a wedding in the wedding chapel of Salzburg, Austria. And then a get-together with family members after that at my mother-in-law's home. And only for family members, nobody else was there. I think the Second World War moved me out of San Saba, took me out into the world, and everything I've done has been through that, and I had never had any intention of staying in the Army as a career. I was in the Army for 30 years, 2 months, and 5 days. For the last 3 years of my tour in Austria, I was in an infantry regiment. And there I was in a courts and boards section where I took care of people that were being court-martialed or boarded out of the Army. After that assignment, I went to Redstone Arsenal, Alabama, where Werner von Braun and his German engineers were developing the country's rocket program. From there, I went back to Europe and I was in Munich, Germany. where I was assigned as a manager of a non-commissioned officers club. And I did that for 4 years. Then I went from there to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where I became a flight operations sergeant at the airfield there. And I stayed there for about a year and a half and went back to Germany. I was in Berchtesgaden this next tour in Germany, which is very close to Salzburg, just across the border. And there I was back in the hotel and club business. After that, I was assigned to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where I was in a training regiment and taught English as English grammar more than anything, so that the clerks that were working for the military had a good knowledge of English and how to use it. From there, I was assigned to Korea for 1 year. And I was at an Army airfield there where I was the flight operations sergeant. After Korea, I went back to Germany to Augsburg, where I was in the 24th Infantry Division, and of that, the 24th Aviation Battalion. I was the intelligence NCO for that battalion. I did that for about 6 months, and then I was asked to become a first sergeant of one of the aviation companies, which I did. And I served that then for almost a year, and then I came out on orders for Vietnam. I served my first tour in Vietnam with the 1st Cavalry Division, where again, for the first 6 months, I was a company first sergeant, and then I moved out to our forward location where I was the operations sergeant for the group. I left there and again went back to Germany. And there, the unit I was assigned to had no aviation by the time I got there. So I was transferred to an aviation battalion where I was the sergeant major of that battalion. And I spent a year there, and then I went back to Vietnam for my second tour, just after 1 year. I was then a first sergeant of a company in the Mekong Delta area for 1 year. And again, I went back to Germany after that tour and went back to the same aviation battalion where I left. There I was a first sergeant for 2 years, and I came back on orders for Vietnam for my third tour. I got to Vietnam and became first sergeant of a company that was just north of Saigon. But we deactivated that company, and I was assigned to an Army airfield in Da Nang. In Da Nang, I was a sergeant major of Marble Mountain Army Airfield for about 6 months. Then I came back, and that was in the summer of 1972. I went to Munich, where I'd left my family, and finally convinced the Army that that's where I should be assigned. I did stay there then for 3 years as the sergeant major of Munich military community. And then I came back to the United States to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, where I had entered the Army and retired on 1 September 1975.
You and your wife had children. Tell us about them.
Fred was born in 1952 on April the 14th.
And what was his given name?
Alfred Christian Wilder.
And when was Bill born?
Bill was born again in Salzburg, and he was born on April the 11th in 1957. And his name is William Ray Wilder.
Named after?
Named after my father, Ray, and me for where he got the William.
Right.
Fred graduated from Stuttgart American High School, and then Bill graduated from Munich American High School. Fred went on to get his basic education at Harvard, and Bill went to Rice in Houston. Fred then went on to become a doctor as a in Houston, Texas, where he attended Baylor Medical School. And Bill stayed in Rice for 12 years, but he graduated with a PhD in biology. Then he went into the environmental consulting business. He and one of his friends established their own business called Axis Environmental. Fred married Debbie Evans that he had met in the hallway in a hospital in Houston. They have 2 children. They have a daughter that was born in 1982 on 27th of March, and a son that was born on the 1st of April. And the daughter's name is Lauren Elizabeth, and the son's name is Brian Christian, and he was born on April the 1st, 1985.
And they ended up marrying and having their own children.
Yes. Lauren married Jacob Reach, who has a PhD. He's a doctor with the Austin Independent School District. And they have 2 children. Gigi was born on September the 18th. Evie was born on 13 December. Brian married Andrea Ramey, and they have 2 children. And the son was born on the 24th of June. And his name is Breck Christian Wilder. They had a daughter that's 2 years old, and her name is Ainsley Ramey Wilder.
Okay, so you have a total of how many great-grandchildren?
I have 4 that are blood great-grandchildren and 2 that are not. 2 that were born from the stepdaughter of Bill, that I've been their great-grandfather all their lives.
And what are their names?
Taylor is the oldest one, and Chase is the youngest one.
All right, and this was from Bill's first marriage.
That's from Bill's stepdaughter from his first marriage.
Right. And what was Bill's first wife's name?
Her first wife's name was Sherry Cox.
Okay, and Bill eventually remarried. Who did he marry?
He remarried Lisa Seiler, who was also an Army brat, and I've known her for 45 years. Her father was also a sergeant major by the time he retired.
So you retired from the Army. What did you do after retiring?
I was only 48 years old. I was looking for a job, something that I wanted to do. And I had been promised if I wanted to work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, I could do that. After not finding anything else, I was in Austin. I moved to Dallas and went to work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. I worked for them for 18 years until I retired in 1993. My grandchildren were in Austin, and I was going to move to Austin. They were planning to build a Sun City somewhere in the Austin area. It turned out to be in Georgetown. As soon as they opened it, I think the second day they started selling homes, I was down here and bought a home. This street was the first street ever opened in Sun City. And there's only myself and one other man, one of the family on this street that are still here, and he's also 95 years of age. When I got married, the only thing I had was a job. And I held on to that, and Ernie was happy with that. And she built my life, really and truly. Everything I did after I got to Austria, I owe to Ernie. I finished my basic degree through the University of Maryland, and also a master's degree through the University of Southern California, all at nighttime. A lot of things we didn't accomplish that we meant to do, but we had 2 great sons, and she was very proud of them, and I am too. So the 65 years I spent with her were the most loving years of my life.